I don't believe that we're going to be at quorum, but why don't we certainly do a formal roll call, Mr. Vogel?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Ms. Dawson? Ms. Dawson? Ms. Evans? Ms. Evans? Mr. Gaffin?
Present.
Mr. Urban? Looks like we lost him. Ms. Kaser?
Present.
Thank you. And I see Mr. Urban is just coming in, so I'm going to mark him as present as well. Judge Kulik?
I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Page?
Present.
Representative Robbins? Representative Robbins? Ms. Sherlock? Ms. Sherlock? Mr. Tatum? Mr. Tatum. Mr. Chair, 5 of the 10 members are present. A quorum is, or one shy of a quorum, but I'll let you know if somebody else comes in.
Yep. Mr. Vogel, did you count me?
I did, Mr. Irvin.
I was switching devices, sorry.
No worries. I saw you come in and recorded you. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, so with that, I think we'll move forward without moving to approve any meeting minutes, since we don't have any, we don't have quorum. We're going to move forward with today. This is our last discussion of juvenile records. We're going to move on starting next week and looking really at 245C's list of disqualifying offenses and the timelines, and spending about 3 weeks looking at that. So what we're going to do today is go over some of the things that we've looked at already, and then sort of start brainstorming and coming up with the hierarchy of what we've come up with and rank them a little bit. Mr. Vogel, what I would propose we do is do that today for the members that are present, but also forward the poll to the other members who are unable to attend.
I can definitely do that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So maybe the first thing we did get some information on race and juvenile records, specifically limited only to Hennepin County, but we thought it was pretty instructive. So we're going to just go briefly over that if we can manage it. If I can share screen, I'll try to make it happen. My apologies. And hopefully, can people see this chart? Okay. I'm going to hack my way through this a little bit, but here's the data that we received regarding, this is all public data received regarding juvenile records, specifically in Hennepin County from the years 2018 to 2022. You can see that the numbers have gone down rather significantly. I would assume that is based on COVID, not any groundbreaking changes in juvenile prosecution, because I think we're going to see that the data is showing a significant rise. And what we can look at too is just some basic decision that 50% of individuals are charged, 27% diverted, and then we've got about 12% declined. And it looks like the diverting post charges and some others. I won't spend much time on it, but here's some information about the types of cases, information by level. And then we have, I'm gonna have to move everyone's photo, but we have information here just on the breakdown by race. And you can see that Black or African American account for 66% of the juvenile cases in Hennepin County, which is a pretty significant number. And if we look at the white prosecutions, it's a tad under 20%. So in Hennepin County, we're seeing 3 times as many Black or African American individuals prosecuted. And then just the breakdown, male or female, is 30 to about 70 to 30. I thought, and that's just, I thought, a good overview. I'm going to also just click on adult prosecution. And And you're seeing some of these trends remain. You see cases going down in 2022, not as precipitously, but significantly have gone down. Interestingly, we see a change with really about, we had 30% of prosecutions, juvenile prosecutions were female, but as adults, it's only 14%. And then with the breakdown between Black or African American and white, it is 62% as opposed to 66%, and 29.17% compared to 19.1% for white juveniles. So even some discrepancies, significant discrepancies between based on race, and also significant discrepancies just based on even between juvenile and adult. So the disparities are more significant within the juvenile system, again, at Hennepin County. And that's really all I had to share on that. I just thought it was helpful information. And I think we've shared this link before. It does go on to some other trends. Obviously we're seeing, different things going down. Like if we look at adult prosecution, we see cases going down. Also seeing though an uptick in 2022. You can see over here we went from year to date 1,800 all the way up to 2,100 year to date in 2022. So interesting changes, interesting stuff to look at. I think it's a kind of a rabbit hole you can go down if you're interested, but I couldn't understand all of it, but I thought it was very interesting.
Mr. Chair, I just sent out that link to the members, and Ms. Dawson has joined us, so we do now have quorum.
Great. And then why don't we move then at this time? I'm going to just the meeting minutes for both the April 19th and May 3rd meetings of the Disqualification Subcommittee were posted on the website, and opening it up for any corrections, changes, edits, thoughts at this time. Seeing no hands raised, we're going to then approve those meeting minutes. Thank you. And does anybody have anything they want to add just based on what we looked at in Hennepin County? Any thoughts on that before we move on? Okay. So we're finishing up juvenile records today, moving to the 245C list of disqualifying disqualifying crimes and factors in the next 3 weeks, and then moving on to a discussion of the foster care laws and rules and how disqualification statute applies. And then we might have a little bit of time just for some catch-all. But one of the things that Mr. Vogel and I had thought about was soliciting individuals who have some expertise or interest to write a preamble moving forward on each of these 3 areas. Again, juvenile, the 245C, listed disqualifiers and years, and then the foster care. And the idea for the preamble would be, as we make recommendations, both to the large group of the task force and then ultimately to the legislature, I think we want to give a few paragraphs describing some basic information, what we thought about, what we looked at, what we considered, and why we're recommending what we're recommending. And I thought that, it made sense for us to start writing that and distributing it as we kind of adopt some things. And truthfully, there are people with significant expertise in some of these areas. Ms. Kaser, I know that you and Ms. Sherlock are very knowledgeable in the foster care area, certainly more knowledgeable than I am. I feel more knowledgeable in the list of disqualifiers under 245C. So we're just looking to see if anyone or multiple people would like to just sort of start this sort of idea of writing a preamble. Obviously, we haven't made decisions on anything, but it would be something kind of moving forward. I would think with the juvenile stuff, we talked about the brain science stuff, we talked about anecdotal stuff, that information we received like from Ms. Dawson's client? And are there people who have the expertise, time, and willingness to help write preambles for any of those three areas? I'm just going to be quiet until somebody raises their hand, so I can outlast all of you.
John, I'm willing to help. I don't know that I necessarily know what is expected. So I would definitely need some guidance on that, but.
Thank you, Ms. Austin. Is there one, and I think the truth is we don't know, but I think we want to set out an expectation that it would seem to make sense that any recommendations have some type of thoughtful introduction. Ms. Austin, is there one, and I'm going to be willing to participate and help on any and all. Is there one, Ms. Austin, that you think interests you or you feel that you want to write about?
I think any of them, either the actual list of disqualifiers or the disqualifying crimes or the juvenile stuff. So I'm happy to help in whatever way.
You know, if you'd be willing, the juvenile makes the most sense to me because you had that connection with that client, and we can bring in some of that anecdotally. And I'd be willing to maybe start writing on the list and share with you. And so, okay. So Mr. Vogel, is that okay, Ms. Dawson, with the juvenile?
Yeah.
Okay. So Ms. Dawson for juvenile, I'll take the next one, and that leaves foster care. Ms. Kaser, I am staring right at you.
I would be certainly willing to help right on that. Yes.
I appreciate you and appreciate you taking that on. I'm sure Ms. Sherlock will help. Okay. So thank you. I think that's really helpful. And I think we can start thinking about how we're going to share that information and, with the rest of us. But all right, we got some assignments. The next thing we want to do is just sort of rehash what we've already kind of our list. Will, are you able to share kind of our list of recommendations or thoughts regarding, the juvenile?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Rules?
Yep. So you should be able to see my screen right now.
We can.
Okay. Yep. And then these are the ideas that have been discussed so far as I'm aware.
What we're going to do, I think would it be fair to say we all know these we know these by now that we've gone over them, or do people feel like we should open this up for a discussion about them? And again, these are the lists of ideas that we've sort of come up throughout the last couple of weeks.
And Chair Giffen, what your question is just, are we all familiar with this? Do we need to discuss it any further?
Yeah, so thank you. The idea is we're going to rank these. We're going to do a poll in a few minutes and kind of rank them, and wondering if we need to have a discussion about them before we rank them. Ms. Kaser, I can see you talking, but I can't hear you. That might not have been to us.
Oh, I was talking to myself, but I don't think I need any discussion. I think I recall them. So.
Okay. Unless anybody else has a question about these, I think, Mr. Vogel, why don't we put it kind of to vote? Not to vote, but to rank.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So just by way of introduction to the members, as I get this ready to go, we cobbled together a poll in Zoom that you should be able to see now. Yes. That will allow you to rank these ideas in order of importance from most important to sixth most important or least important. Mr. Chair, as I understand it, you hadn't intended this to be any sort of like formal vote or binding thing, right?
It is not. The idea is just for us to sort of figure out just honestly what we think are the ones that are higher up to start thinking about some other language that we want to add or subtract. And just, I think, get an idea
and then finally,
where we are for consensus.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. And then finally, I should note to the members that your responses are not anonymous, and if in the very unlikely event that somebody wants to see the results of this poll as part of the open meeting law, we would provide that. So just be aware. But I don't think that's a particularly pressing thing.
Okay. And so somehow I lost it.
I only see 4. Am I doing it wrong? Oh, nope, there we go. I'm doing it wrong. Just kidding.
Oh, I got it.
And looking at the live results I'm seeing, it kind of looks like somebody managed to answer each of the rankings. I do apologize. We whipped this up very quickly, and I don't think Zoom's very well set up to do a ranked choice voting poll.
Oh, it doesn't work.
I'm not sure.
It seems to be working for me.
Okay.
How's it working well? Is it coming back in a way that makes sense?
I believe so, Mr. Chair. It's reporting the data to me in color code form, which is very unhelpful without a key, but I should be able to see that when I ended the poll. Oh, wait, no, there's the key at the bottom. Okay. Okay, it looks like we have 5 of 7 participants who've answered. I know we have Ms. Kassane on the call, who's not a member, so I think we have one more member left to answer this. And thanks for bearing with us, members. Oh, actually, that might be Carol. All right, is anyone still working on the poll? Okay, in that case, I'm going to end it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, and I can hit share results here, and you should all be able to see it. The key for the color coding is at the bottom if you scroll down. You can also full screen it, I think.
That causes my head to explode.
Yeah. So I know at least one participant, I think, and indicated the same ranking for each of them. So that adds a little bit of noise into here. But it looks like prohibiting disqualifications based on juvenile records for offenses committed under the age of 14 is popular. Your suggestion, Chair Geffen, of the long quote at the bottom here, that's very popular. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if you hover over the bars, it does give you how many people voted for each of them, which is helpful.
Thank
What
you,
may
Mr.
not
Page.
be helpful is the numerator or the denominator. How many people we have may not be entirely informative. The results look pretty spread out to me.
I agree. And I think the other thing, before we get it move too far, that I think, Mr. Vogel, we want to make sure that this is sent out to the other members just to get an understanding of what we're at with the full group. When Mr. Vogel and I were talking today, or even about a week ago, we thought maybe we were kind of done with juvenile, and even had talked about kind of moving past it. It feels like we've talked a lot about juvenile. with that said, I think we want to have our last discussion about what are some of the guiding principles. I mean, if we're asking Ms. Dawson to start writing something about juveniles, what are some of those guiding principles that she could include to identify why change is necessary, or if it is, in the Background Studies Act as it involves juvenile records? And Mr. Vogel, I think we can stop sharing that. What are, I mean, for me, you know, Ms. Dawson, one of the things I think that always guides me is just that, you know, the brain science obviously doesn't support that children are fully developed, and their decision making is significantly impacted by that lack of brain development. Sorry, Judge, I didn't see your hand up, please.
Well, you stole some of my thunder, and that's okay, because I was going to go right back to brain development. And also, because the very goal of the juvenile justice system is rehabilitation, that flies in the face of having so many permanently closed doors, or doors that are closed for a long, long time, with juveniles who do mature and who do get the resources and services they need. And we still have all these, we keep barriers in mind when it's antithetical to the whole goal of rehabilitation and juvenile justice.
Perfect. Anybody else have any kind of those guiding thoughts or principles? And Ms. Dawson, is this helpful for you?
Yep, I'm taking notes as we talk.
Okay. Yeah, I know it would be helpful to me, so I'm just assuming it would be helpful to you. Ms. Kaser, please.
Well, I think just the data you showed us today, I think that point about it disproportionately impacts individuals of color and the long-term effects that could have. So that's another key principle I think we want to point out.
That's a great point. Thank you very much. Anybody else? It would seem any of us that made a recommendation, I'm going to hit up Mr. Page pretty soon just because he's being way too quiet. And we appreciate his input. I mean, Mr. Page, when you made a suggestion, what was guiding your thoughts on that? If you feel comfortable sharing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My suggestion was it involved when the look back period or disqualification period would begin. And I guess the underlying principle at the heart of that is to try to capture the period during which a person begins their rehabilitative process, or their process of moving away from that kind of activity. And so that is not necessarily unique to juveniles, but I think we don't want disqualification periods covering times when someone is not being rehabilitated, not receiving services, and that kind of thing. So it applies more to adults and then less to juveniles, but that's the reason behind it.
Perfect. Thank you. And sorry to put you on the spot. I mean, I think too about just the fact that there is strength in the fact that if an individual, a juvenile, makes some mistakes and they go through a period of time without reoffending, they can be judged on any reoffending as a subsequent juvenile case or even a subsequent adult criminal matter. That is a really important piece, that they still are going to be judged on mistakes. It's not like a free ride or a free ticket. And I also wanted to hit on the fact that, you know, we do have permanent disqualifications for juveniles, which is so antithetical to me that you would say that this person may never, despite any level of rehabilitation or change, is never able to fully reintegrate and do some things that he or she or they want to do. It seems like a pretty unfair system, in my opinion. That was what guided my thoughts on that. Any other guiding principles that could help Ms. Dawson as she puts pen to paper? Ms. Kaser.
And I'm probably not going to articulate this really well, but I think that we could also point out that, there are some crimes and conduct and behavior that is concerning. And there is a process with the EJJ process that really assesses and fully looks at that. And so why aren't we allowing that process to happen when we're considering backgrounds going forward and not subjecting kind of a blanket approach for all juveniles and disqualifications?
That's a really good point. And I would think too, maybe what would be helpful, maybe Ms. Dawson, I don't know how much we do of this, but identifying the existence of EJJ, identifying the existence of charging individuals as adults, because a lot of the recommendations don't include that group or treats them differently. And certainly as we bring this to the larger group that has not had so many discussions about juvenile cases, and even to the legislature, I think it would be instructive to kind of give that background. So people, I think it will give some context to the recommendations. Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think additionally, it may be worth, especially for some of the more serious crimes for which we're saying, we're not creating a permanent disqualification, that there should be evidence of rehabilitation, and that we kind of drafted and created a definition based on some national standards for rehabilitation, and that those things should be taken into consideration when deciding whether to set aside a disqualification for a serious crime, or, in order to view juveniles or young adults as the people that they are at the time, rather than based on, one thing that happened a number of years ago.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too, Mr. Page, because we have that one of the recommendations deals with the permanency issue. And we're going to have to kind of mesh our permanency recommendations with permanency for adults. But as we look specifically at juveniles, I think the recommendation was that there shouldn't be a permanent DQ without allowing somebody the opportunity to request a set aside, which currently is a closed door. And I think that's the overall thing, is we still are saying we want our vulnerable populations and our children to be safe. And we're balancing that. And I think there might be individuals who have certain crimes or conduct that indicate they are not safe providers. And we're balancing that. I think we should be overt about identifying that, because I don't think anybody wants our vulnerable populations hurt ever and in any way. Yes, Judge, please.
To piggyback on what you said, because what we're saying is, don't just take these former juvenile delinquents and put them in a job, but open the door to a close examination. Because I would argue you can get folks off the street and hire them, and it's a crapshoot if they don't have this particular legal record behind them. But as far as who you're getting and what they're capable of, and people who work with vulnerable adults, we know what the stats are going forward. So that's one thing. And my other sort of big principle is that there's a strong economic argument, of course, with adults too. But when the moral argument and the economic argument align so well, it just seems to be a winner no matter what side of a political fence you're on. And it's pretty easy to quantify what we lose when we close the door to a juvenile, because being in the foster care system and the juvenile jurisdiction and delinquency system sets them on the wrong track. We know what it costs us. We know what they lose in their earning ability and all that. It's a big economic loss for all of us. If we open the door to more possibilities for them, boy, you quantify that, and it's a big economic win to get them back in the workforce when we really need employees, and to make sure that they've got incentive to stay there and be a tax-paying, law-abiding adult.
Yeah, it does make sense really for both sides of the aisle. I think it's a great point. And this preamble is going to get pretty long, Lucas. You're going to have to, that's going to be a dissertation. I love it.
Yes, it is.
Lucas, what else could we do to help give you information that's supportive of your writing endeavor?
I think at this point, I mean, having been at most of these meetings and of course offering my own input and represented juveniles themselves, I think at this point, given this, it probably is just a matter of starting to write and then of course coming back to the group to make sure that it's the spirit of what everybody intended.
Perfect. And I'm available for any kind of steps before that if you want and need it.
Yep, thank you. No, this is much more than I feel like I always get when trying to write memos for a court. So this is good.
And then I want to transition into what I think will be our discussion in the next few weeks is this idea of this huge list, 7, 10, 15 permanent. And I want to think, I want us to be ahead of it in a way to structure our discussions in the coming weeks that makes it the most valuable and thoughtful. I mean, one way was we just go, look at this list. Isn't this crazy? What do we do? But I think if we're more thoughtful about it now, we can be more productive later. And the truth is, I don't know how to do it. And would love some ideas on how do we start looking at it. Is it as simple as we go through the list? It's just so long and big, I don't know how to get my arms around it. Yeah, Mr. Page, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My recommendation would be to lean towards simplicity and identify the most serious crimes and establish what we think the length should be for those most serious crimes, and then everything else should fall into, all crimes not identified should fall into its own category, either of a certain time period or no time period, I guess.
So, I mean, it sort of seems to me, and I apologize if I'm blowing this, but like, we're really kind of looking at two things. Is the list right? Like, should this offense be on the list? And then the second one is, if it's on the list, how long should the disqualification be? Are those two separate things we should be looking at? And do we separate them, or how do we, does that make sense, Mr. Page? Again, my brain can't figure this, how to approach this.
I think that's right. I think if there are certain crimes that are required, I guess starting with the Adam Walsh Act and, kind of following the guidance that we need to there, then identifying, which crimes we believe are most serious, that require or that should have a presumption of some disqualification period. And whether that's EJJ or certification, and then so if Adam Walsh is step 1, identifying any additional crimes would be step 2. Step 2A would be what's the disqualification period, and then step 3, saying that all other offenses have no disqualification period, or if there's some other category we would want to create, but that would be my suggestion.
I like that. Anybody else? I mean, because what we could do is take the statute and essentially highlight everything in it that's Adam Walsh.
Chair Giffen.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I do want to jump in here. Ms. Evans, I'm pretty sure, had done a pretty detailed list that was provided at, I don't know if it was this meeting or the remedies subcommittee, because the remedies subcommittee has looked very extensively at the permanent list of disqualifiers. I don't think this subcommittee needs to look at that. In fact, the Adam Walsh really only covers the permanent list as well as some that fall under the 5-year. I think it's also important for this group to keep in mind as we're thinking about this. Adam Walsh only does permanent and 5-year, as do a number of other states actually around us. I think Iowa, Wisconsin, I feel like Ohio maybe it's so, again, we're an outlier, but I think it really does take that deep dive into the actual list itself, pulling them out individually. What are the crimes, identifying what they are. I also think it's important to look at, are these really crimes of, I guess where I look at like those, the person crimes where somebody is actually harmed, or are these crimes of poverty? Because to me, if we're disqualifying people for what would be more the crimes of poverty, for example, the welfare fraud, they need the job. They're the ones who actually need it. So but I do think what we learned definitely in the remedy subcommittee was it took that hard legwork of actually, and there's, because if this subcommittee is going to look then at the 15, 10, and 7, it really does take bullet pointing them out and looking at each one individually.
And I mean, you guys went through just the permanent DQ list. I just start thinking about the full list. It's pretty darn long. How did you guys streamline it in a way that you could get through it without, your eyes glossing over?
I mean, I think, well, Josh, Esme, myself, and Gina Evans put in some considerable time outside of meeting time to actually break them down.
I think we need to do that.
And and I'm happy to help with that. I also think, and maybe like Mr. Page too, sorry, Max, don't hate me. But, those of us who are attorneys and Judge Kulik, where some of that stuff we can probably look at faster and know what it is, that it takes less time, for example, than like Ms. Kaser, who might actually have to go into some of the statutes and read them a little bit closer. And that's just what we had to do, but it worked because I feel like it allowed us to actually think about it individually. And we had a running Word document that we shared that we'd make edits to right in the meeting. But I think that sort of by practice, our group practiced on a smaller scale, but I think it worked.
It would seem to me that we would want to have a document at some point that lists the disqualifying offense and have some information in there about what that means in a non-legal term, so anyone, whether it's a member of this group or whether it's a member of the community, can understand it.
And I think Ms. Evans, I don't know, I don't remember when the document was sent, but I think she has at least started that work. I don't think we have to totally reinvent the wheel, but I do believe she's
okay. And my understanding was, in looking at her document, a lot of it was focused on whether this is essentially a person crime, a property crime, or like a theft crime.
Correct.
Yeah. So
I think it's just a starting point.
Okay.
We may want to look at it differently, but I do think that's a starting point with a document to start working from.
I think it makes sense. And I don't know if there's just some magic, easy way.
Well, and I think it's just a daunting task that is unfortunately one that it's like, you just got to start, and it is what it is.
I agree. I was hoping somebody had some magic that was going to make this so much easier. Color codes, some type of, I don't know, acronym. Okay. I think what we might need to do is extend then some of the meetings that in the next few weeks from an hour to an hour and a half. What do you guys think of that? I don't do that lightly. You all are donating so much of your time, but it seems for us to do a good job. Mr. Vogel and I and Gina need to do a lot of work before the next meeting to get it ready to present, but we have to have some pretty thoughtful discussions moving forward that are going to take some time.
Mr. Chair, could we meet on the off weeks when this committee doesn't meet? I just know going into the past 5 o'clock into the evening starts to get a little dicier for me.
Explain that again, Mr. Page. Like, well, you mean?
Well, you're up, Mr. Chair. We appear on my calendar. We meet every 2 weeks in the subcommittee. I'm just wondering if we make this a weekly subcommittee, and whoever wants to show up to the off weeks when we're not meeting. So that would be on the May 24th, June
Okay.
7th.
So-
that kind of thing.
Is your proposal we keep to an hour, but we add off weeks just for the next few weeks while we go through this sort of daunting list of stuff?
That would be my suggestion, yes.
And Chair Geffen, I actually would support that. I just know with getting to kid activities and stuff like that, you start to run into that 5:30 time, and it's summer and it's Minnesota, and I have my video off because my kids have run in 20 times already. So it just gets to be hard.
Yeah, I understand. Ms. Austin, is in your just life, is it easier to add a half hour once every 2 weeks, or just to keep it shorter and be weekly?
I'm actually fine, I guess, and I'm definitely open to whatever the group wants. I'm fine with weekly, also just because having done the permanency list, it is a daunting task, and we're going to be looking at 15, 10, and 7. We only looked at 1, and I think it took us a couple meetings. So
Okay.
I think also so people's eyes gloss over.
It does sound like a pretty hard hour and a half, doesn't it?
It's a lot to go through, and will become, especially at the end of a day, I think could be a lot.
Ms. Kaser, Mr. Irvin, Judge Kulik, what are your thoughts on that? I am very conscious of your time and its value.
Well, I've got trials. Sometimes I can be here because like this weekend, everything's settled, lucky me. But otherwise, I'm kind of a empty nester. I got nowhere to go. So, every week, good, go longer, good. Yeah, I can tell because the other judge from the 10th, I can't remember her name now. I think I know she's got kids at home, and it's a lot harder for her and it's easier for me. So I'm good with whatever you got.
Okay.
I would just add, the opposite weeks, I would be available this time frame. I don't have anything, but after 5, it does get a little bit more challenging. I can be flexible, but yeah.
How about you, Mr. Irvin?
I would be in the same boat as Ms. Kaser. I'd rather go add the opposite week as an additional meeting than go past 5.
Okay. All right. So we won't have meetings during our kids' soccer practices. We're going to go every other week. And I think people just, if you don't make one, you don't make one. And we will do our best to make sure that with each, the beginning, Mr. Vogel, hopefully you will remind me that the beginning of each of those meetings, we're going to do 5 minutes about what we did in the last one. Just so, because it is summer and, for these 2 months, we might as well have some fun before it snows. Okay. All right. Are we going to should we just jump in next week, or do we wait 2 weeks?
Oh, Chair, I don't know. I raised my hand. I don't know if I needed to, but I'm happy to start next week. I also was going to volunteer. If it's helpful, I'm willing to meet offline. I was supposed to be in trial this week, and it didn't settle like Judge Kulik was fortunate enough to have. It just got pushed out. But I'm happy to meet offline just to kind of get a Word document started for everybody to really start working from as kind of an initial point. But I'm happy to help in any way.
And I know that, are you going to be available tomorrow at 8:30? Is that tomorrow, Will?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Can we chat about it offline tomorrow, Lucas?
Yep, I will actually be there. I had a different hearing that moved, so.
All right. Well, we're going to end early then before we start doing a lot of work. But before we do, are there any, this is sort of the end of our discussion on juvenile. We will certainly talk about it in the larger group, talk about it when we get the preamble going, but our thoughtful, in-depth discussion of juvenile will be ending today. Any last issues with juvenile or our plan moving forward when we tackle the disqualification list? Okay, I just, as always, thank everybody for their time. And with that, we're adjourned. And Mr. Vogel will we'll chat tomorrow too about moving forward on the 24th. And we will try to be prepared for that for everybody.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.